post some OC. This happened when I was 15. It's not really paranormal or anything, but it's pretty creepy to me at least. B15. Best friend is also 15. We love the outdoors and hiking and camping. Decide to go in the woods and hike some trails and explore. Pack some food, water, a hunting knife, and a pellet gun. I mean, we were 15, come on. We get to the woods. We decide to go off trail. Hiking off trail for about 30 minutes, maybe a little less. Terrain is pretty rough, obviously. Eventually, we come across some weird stuff. Stuff like ripped children's clothing, one children's shoe, ripped women's undergarments. All of a sudden, hear movement in the bushes behind us. Turn around. There stands a fucking man with a bicycle, just giving us this deathly stare that gave me chills to the bone. What really hit me within the first 5 seconds was the fact that he was off trail with his bicycle. It didn't make sense to me. I mean, why? The fucking terrain is impossible for riding a bike. It's rocky, tons of logs and shit. Why would you go off trail for half an hour and drag your bike with you? So, we're just staring at each other for about 30 seconds. My friend had a knife in his pocket. I reached inside my bag for the pellet pistol, and we just fucking moved out of there as quick as we could. I honestly can't remember a time in my life where I was more terrified. That guy was just wrong. Everything about him was just wrong. I think he didn't attack us, honestly, because my friend and I both looked like we were reaching for something. And I think he might have thought we were armed. A few years after that happened, I heard about people in national parks going missing under really weird circumstances. Apparently that ex-cop David Paulides talks about it a lot. Now if I ever go into the woods, I make sure to take a Glock with me, and always take my friend as well since he has a German Shepherd. I also never go off the trails. Fuck that noise. Whenever you guys go in the woods, make sure you're fucking cautious. I got one for you guys, and it doesn't involve spooky ghosts or monsters, in the fictional sense at least. My dad is actually the one who told me this. It happened to one of his good friends from high school or college or something. I can't remember the finer details, so forgive me. Late 1970s, Dad's friend and her best friend are on a road trip. Both are attractive brunette young women, driving through Colorado, I think. Late into the night on an empty road/highway, they come across a guy with a broken car waving for help. Keep in mind, this was the 70s, so, people were less cautious back then and all of that. Pull over and stop to help him. Very handsome and strikingly charming guy, seemingly around their age. After talking for a bit, the guy reaches into his trunk to get out his spare or something, but he takes out a hammer instead, and he starts bludgeoning the girl, the one that my dad didn't know. Beats her to death, bludgeons other girl, my dad's friend, and gets in car, runs her over before driving off. Turns out my dad's friend survived, but the car running her over paralyzed her from the waist down. Her friend was killed. I believe she was found later that night and rushed to a hospital. They never found the guy, but at least my dad's theory is that it was Ted Bundy. Same area, same period of time, same type of target. Then again, it could be any psycho, but who knows? Not paranormal, but it could have been a bad ending. They've all said not paranormal so far. That's strange. Anyway, leave house and go to shop at the top of my street. Darkish, but it's only about 7 p.m. See a woman walking down street, looking at houses. It's my mother's friend. She's only been to our place once, and so she's probably looking to see which one's familiar. She looks super spaced out. I've never known her to take drugs or really even drink. Go up to her to say hello and tell her which one our house is. As soon as I get up to her and open my mouth to talk, I realize it's not my mother's friend at all. She looks really taken aback and puts her hand in her handbag. It's pretty awkward, to be honest, and I don't want to get pepper sprayed by some crackhead. I just cross over the street towards the shop without saying a word. Come out of shop and round the corner back into the street. Can see my house from where I am. See woman in my garden, but she's not just in my garden. She's standing up against a window with her hands cupped around her eyes trying to see in. But the blinds and curtains are closed, so you can't see anything. Turn full coward and hide behind a car. Spy on her leaving. Get to my gate, and she's near the bottom of the street. Turns around just as I enter, and she starts sprinting at me. Fuck this. Run in the house and lock the door. Mother asks me what's going on, but I shush her. Hear garden gate open, and footsteps approaching. Wait for knock on door. Nothing happens. At the same time, I don't hear her leave. Peep out window, and she's nowhere to be seen. Following day, go back to shop. All of the papers are by the counter, and I'm reading the headlines. See psycho woman's face from last night on the front page of local rag. Turned out, she'd gone home from work, and her husband said he was leaving her. So, she just flipped, and she stabbed him to death. Then she left the house with a knife in her bag, and started stabbing at any men that she came across, as quote-unquote revenge. She stabbed like 4 or 5 people, before the police finally caught up with her. Not really sure how to best tell this story, but I'll post it here, I guess. I'm around 13 to 14 at the time. I walk dogs on the same route around the village. I've always walked down a really long stretch between backyards of opposite houses. Garages and sheds ran along one side, brick walls along the other. Halfway through the lane was an old rundown car with a little black dome thing on the dashboard. Said dome was constantly blinking red, either an alarm or a camera, I imagine. In front of the car was a real dilapidated horse box, rusted to all hell. Holes in open areas were heavily boarded up with wood and sheet metal, and every time I walked down this lane, the dogs would constantly run to the horse box and frantically start sniffing around it, consistently pulling back on the leash as I would try and pull them away. I thought nothing of it. Until I noticed the other dogs would behave the same way around it. And so the horse box began to gain my curiosity. Begin to take dogs out more often just to see if they would eventually lose interest in the horse box. They don't. If anything, they got more persistent. They would start dragging me towards it, sometimes growling at it or me when I would try and pull them away. Decided to try and take a look for myself, because it wouldn't hurt. Started circling the box as best as I could, looking for some kind of opening, when I noticed a relatively loose piece of wood towards the top of the box, being held in place by a couple of rusty nails. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tried to get a peek inside by pulling the wood just a little. Decided probably not the best idea after I heard footsteps coming towards the gate beside the box, so I yanked the dogs away and hurried to the end of the lane. It could have been nothing, and I didn't bother looking back. A few days passed, and I wanted, or needed, to take another look. The horse box now had my attention. Started going out with the dogs later in the evening, during the quieter times, less likely to be interrupted, I thought. Sun was setting earlier. This was late summer, so days began getting shorter, but still had plenty of daylight to start snooping. So I took the dogs on the walk, same route, just at a different time. Started coming up towards the lane, but my plans changed when I saw some old man standing directly in front of the horse box, just staring at it. He had a dog with him, and it was the first dog I'd seen which hadn't gone apeshit when next to said horse box. Thought to myself, maybe it was just one big coincidence that every dog I'd seen acted the same way. I continued to watch the fella from afar. I pretended to pick up dog shit so I would look relatively normal if he took a glance at me and saw me hanging around. The old man then began toying with the horse box, touching the wood, adjusting the sheet metal. He stood doing this for a while. Hell, I'm not even sure how long I was standing there just quote-unquote picking up dog shit. After a while, he just stood and stared at it for several more minutes before opening the gate beside it and walking into his backyard. That makes a lot of sense, I thought. Explains why the dog wasn't showing any interest with the thing. More days passed, and the summer break was slowly coming to a close. Decided to make it my mission to now find out what was inside the horse box before school started again, since it gets the dogs all spooked up. Sun probably sets around 7 p.m., and I decided to go and have another look. I grabbed a flashlight and headed out. This time, I left the dogs at home. So the time had come, I thought. No pussyfooting around this time. No dogs, no distractions. Come up to the horse box. Never really affected me in any way like it did with the dogs. But that's a whole different story when it's dark. No street lamps around, and the only light illuminating this piece of junk was my dim flashlight. I actually started feeling a little nauseous. Still not quite sure whether it was this inanimate object that was causing me to feel this way, or me thinking that maybe I was breaking the law in some way. Decided to nut up, and I circled the thing, but I couldn't find the loose wood that I'd moved about a week or so ago. Old man had clearly made some improvements. Now there was more nails in the wood. More sheet metal had been applied. Something was in this box that he didn't want people to see. His defense had leveled up tenfold. Started thinking to myself that maybe I wasn't best equipped for such a task, and maybe I would need some tools to get the job done. Those thoughts were quickly diminished when I noticed that an area had been untouched by Tim Allen from Home Improvement. I managed to pull myself up to the open part of the box by positioning myself awkwardly on the wheel arch. Probably should have used a headlamp or something in hindsight, because trying to keep myself balanced, upright, and try and pull myself up to eye level with this open area was a chore. Now do that with one free hand and a flashlight in the other? Yeah. Alas, I stabilized myself in a comfortable position, and I got my light to shine inside. Not sure if it was because I was elevated, but some very bizarre smell, which I still to this day can't put my finger on, suddenly hits me. A stench I'd never smelled before now hits me like a train. I guess this was why the dogs went bananas around the thing. I still couldn't make out what was inside, so I tried to lift myself higher. In doing so, I pulled a piece of wood from the box, and I dropped my flashlight inside, and slipped. So, the fall clearly made a whole lot of noise, but not enough to disturb the peace, I would say. But being the ignorant, set-in-my-ways kind of guy that I am, I completely forgot about the little blinking red light in the car beside the box. Pretty sure it was a camera. So I got back up, and I went for another look. Lo and behold, the footsteps started coming, and they sounded in a hurry. I started to panic, and I didn't know what to do or where to go. I kind of just froze. The gate behind me swung open, and in an instant, I was now face to face with the guy. He was old, like he looked really old. Leathery skin, a dirty mustache, deep, dark circles under his eyes, and he didn't say a word. He kind of just grabbed me by both shoulders and somewhat gently pushed me against the horse box. With my back up against it, I had nowhere to look but straight at him. It didn't even feel as though he was looking at me. I know it sounds cliche, but it did feel like he was looking right through me. Like the only thing he could see was the horse box. He stood like this for several seconds, before pulling out some kind of disposable camera and taking a snapshot of what must have been a very pale face of mine. He then fixed his focus to actually look at me and said something along the lines of, "Silly boy," or "stupid boy," and he shook his head. Pretty sure he went to say something else as he looked at his disposable camera, but I decided I wasn't in the mood to make small talk, and I legged it back down the lane, back the way I came. Fair to say, I didn't want to go back to this lane, and I avoided it religiously for several months. Just after Christmas, I decided to take an early morning walk down the lane just to see if Tim Allen had made any more improvements. The horse box was nowhere to be seen, and neither was the car with the camera/alarm. I felt as though a weight had been lifted off my chest, knowing this old guy had relocated his creepy junk somewhere else. I still didn't like the thought of this guy potentially having a photograph of me lying around somewhere, but the thought of him being out of the area was good enough. I never saw the old guy again, nor did I ever see that horse box again, and walking my dogs was far easier without them being constantly distracted by it. Around the end of January, I was taking a walk with a friend to the park, and we took the lane out as a shortcut. The entire backyard of Horsebox House was cornered off with police tape, and several officers were stood around the area. I looked into the yard, and there were men in white hazmat suits walking up and down his garden, and several holes had been dug along the patch of grass. I don't know where the old man went, and I still to this day don't know what was going on in the back of his yard. I don't think I'll ever find out. This could really work as a prequel or a side story to the Pen Pal storyline. If you've read the Pen Pal storyline, I feel like you'd potentially agree. And it's like, oh, this is that same stalker from Pen Pal. This is just Someone else called him being a freaky little boy. Freaky little creepy creepster. Tim Allen the stalker. Girlfriend lets me live with her, but doesn't let me see the basement. Always locked. Very stern about it. I never thought much about it, but today, I found a drawer of hers with a bunch of random people's driving license, watches, and wallets. I looked up some of the people, and they were all missing people in our area. Should I be concerned about any of this, or am I overreacting? I would ask her about it, but our wedding is in a few days, and I don't want to start an argument over what is likely nothing. What is likely nothing? God damn. We don't try to victim blame in this house, but like you kind of yeah. What is it about being naked that makes someone feel so vulnerable? I mean, really, are you suddenly stronger with clothes? Maybe if you're the type who goes around wearing steel-toed boots and Kevlar, but if you are, something tells me that even in the buff, you probably know more than the average Joe about self-defense and would stand a good chance in a fight either way. I attribute my particular fear of having to fight nude to the classic Psycho movie. Chalk it up to poor parenting that my earliest childhood Halloweens were not spent dressed as Snoopy out getting mountains of candy, but were instead spent in a darkened room alone with access to cable TV. The shower scene always stuck with me. Traumatized me, you could say, and brought many a day where family fights would erupt over me staying firmly locked in the single shared bathroom until I was fully clothed and ready to face whoever was on the other side of the door. It's a habit, a fear, which had saved my life a little over a year ago. I live in a big city, and with it comes big city crimes. Nightly news reports of robberies, shootings, and the like are not uncommon. Still, I like to think of myself as well protected. I lived on the second floor of an apartment building, which coincidentally means a pre-installed alarm system came with the package. The front desk was manned at all hours of the day, and my place was at the rear of the building, facing another building directly behind my own. I could see their 24-hour security guard booth from my bedroom window, and between us sat a tall dividing wall. You could say that the nightly news didn't give me much bother. All of those thoughts of security went out of the aforementioned bedroom window in the course of a single night. I normally take my showers in the morning, but this evening I just felt like soaking under the hot water for relaxation more than for hygiene. I went through my pre-shower check. Front door locked, windows locked, sliding door locked, alarm up. I sauntered into the bathroom and firmly closed and locked the door behind me. I stood under the warm jet stream, eyes closed and hands outstretched toward the water, soaking in the calm, when I heard a rattle. I quickly opened my eyes and ripped back the shower curtain. The door was closed. The handle was still. It wouldn't have been the first time I imagined the scene. I took a deep breath and slipped back into the water, trying to let it go and relax my now tense muscles. A few minutes passed. It must have been my mind, and then I heard a thump on the door, and the rattle once again. One hand slammed on the water faucet while the other once again tore back the curtain. The door was still closed, but I was sure it wasn't my imagination anymore. The whir of the bathroom fan seemed deafening. The door handle was motionless, and any sound beyond that was muffled by the fan. My eyes strained watching the knob, my hair and body frozen with fear, even as water continued to stream off of me. Suddenly the handle started convulsing, and a loud thud rammed against the door. I screamed as I sprang out of the tub and shoved my body against the door. The figure on the other side rammed against the door again, and I felt the impact run through me. I screamed again. A deep chuckle responded. My body was trembling from the tips of my soaked hair to the points of my numb toes. My back remained firmly pressed against the door, bracing for another attack. None came. A minute passed. It seemed like an eternity when I heard that chuckle again, but it seemed to come from a lower height than before. I looked down and saw the knife reflecting my body against its silver surface. Its edges were smeared with what I instantly knew as blood. I slammed the light switch off, refusing to let the menace outside get any kicks from seeing how terrified I was inside. The whir of the fan stopped, and the only sound I was left with were the shallow gasps of my own breath. I heard the knife slip back out from the crack beneath the door, a slight deliberate withdrawal, making me all the more aware of its presence so close to me. "Come on out, my little shower princess." My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel my heart nearly bursting from my chest. The voice was low and deep, but the narrator unfortunately sounds like this, so the voice was not low and deep. I didn't respond. I couldn't even begin to think. I was trapped, and the only way out was through him. I started screaming at the top of my lungs, the terror and desperation more real than any of the horror flicks I'd ever watched. I hoped my neighbors were home. I hoped that because I sometimes heard their weekend parties, and now they would hear my pleas for help. I screamed until the tears were running down my cheeks, mixing with the shower water and dripping from my chin to the floor below. My pleas were now barely a whisper, but still, he heard it. "Honey, ain't no one gonna help you now but me." That doesn't sound like you want to help her. It sounds like you want to attack her and kill her with your freaking big old knife. He didn't try to ram the door again, and the handle remained motionless throughout the hours that I stood silently crying. I heard him moving through my apartment. I heard scratching on the other side of the door, but he didn't try to get in again. I stood like that in the dark, cold, wet, and naked, until the rays of daylight began to shine from underneath the bathroom door. I didn't know if he was still there, waiting, and so I just stayed where I was, waiting. It was 11 in the morning when I heard the shouts at my front door. I couldn't understand them, but I screamed in return. I heard my front door shatter and the quick thud of many boots rushing into my apartment. They all screamed, Ma'am, where are you?" I demanded that the officer push his ID underneath the door before I opened it. It didn't matter that I was naked. I fell into his arms, breaking down and sobbing all over again, while someone else covered me with a blanket. I returned to my apartment only once since the incident to gather my personal belongings, some of which were missing. I knew I would never feel safe there again. I was right about it being blood. My captor killed not only the security guard from the building just behind mine, but also the young couple who lived next door to me. My alarm system was bypassed by a simple magnet, and the latch on my sliding door was easily pried open. Both facts have left me with a severe distrust of the token security features thrown into apartments in order to close a deal. These facts also let me know that he could have broken through my flimsy bathroom door, or its weak lock, anytime he wanted to. Perhaps he just preferred playing with me. My uncle used to work at a mental ward. One story he told me still gives me the heebie-jeebies. He remembers one patient that was admitted, convicted of arson. The official report claimed that police and firefighters responded to a 911 call, stating that an abandoned church was burning. Upon arriving at the fire, this patient was standing out front, watching it burn. An officer approached with a hand on his taser and asked, "Did you start this fire, sir?" The man turned his head, looked the officer in the eye, and said, "My name is Thomas." "Not, sir. Don't you ever forget that." And he lunged at the officer. Whoa, the officer stunned him and he was detained. The court ruled him insane. He pled guilty to arson, and he was sent to my uncle's psych ward. This man called himself Thomas, but his driver's license said something else. There were no previous or legal indications that this man had ever been referred to as Thomas. Any attempt to disregard the name Thomas for the man's real one was met with contempt and forceful resistance. The first night he arrived at the ward, he was assigned a roommate, which he protested. His roommate was a huge black man who insisted he was a small white Southern belle, and the orderlies called him Tina. My uncle's working the night shift with his partner Greg, and everything's going well. Lights are out, all is quiet. And a knock on the office door came. It's Tina. She was visibly uncomfortable and emotionally distraught. Tearing up, she informed Greg and my uncle that Thomas had made it impossible for her to sleep, and had been calling her names. She requested a room change. "Well, what's he doing?" Greg asked her. "Come with me," Tina said. "Look, if you think I'm going to try and do like a big black man impersonating a young Southern belle's voice, you got me fucked up. I'm not even going to try to do that." My uncle and Greg followed her down the hallway to the room where Thomas was being kept. Before they entered the room, they smelled why Tina had come. Thomas had covered the walls in his own fecal matter, but this was not the work of an ordinary madman. The wall had been covered in designs, symbols, intricate insignias, and a few crosses. This was the first night, and things only got weirder. Thomas was given his own room, and a 24-hour nurse to be stationed just outside his door, just to make sure he was using the urinal that was provided for him. About a week later, a second incident occurred. The nurse failed to check in on the radio one night, and my uncle and Greg went to investigate. They found Thomas had tied the orderly to his bed using his sheets, and was drawing blood from the man to perform a similar operation on the walls of this room. Again, these were intricate designs resembling the work of a practiced artist, and drawn in thick red. It took 2 more orderlies to subdue Thomas, a man of average build and height. He was eventually sedated, and the traumatized orderly gave his 2 weeks' notice the next day. Thomas had been in my uncle's ward for over 2 weeks at this point, and he now was under constant supervision, and had been issued a straitjacket. A couple shifts later, the nurse stationed outside Thomas's room radioed in that Thomas wasn't in the room, that they don't see him. In the event of an escaped patient, and in Thomas's case especially, employees knew they faced extreme personal danger. My uncle and Greg rushed to his room. Upon opening the doorway, Thomas jumped and tackled Greg to the ground. Side note, my uncle's theory is that he had flattened himself against the door as much as possible, which is where he came from. Taken back by the sheer suddenness of this attack, my uncle and the nurse took a half-second to allow their bodies and minds to calibrate to the situation. Thomas had Greg's shoulders pinned. They locked eyes, and Thomas brought his head down to Greg's ear. My uncle thought he had meant to bite Greg, but instead, Thomas whispered something very softly, so that my uncle and the other orderly couldn't hear it. When they pulled Thomas off of Greg, Greg's eyes were wide, and he sat up trembling. Thomas was smiling. My uncle asked Greg what Thomas had whispered to him, but Greg just shook his head. He quit that night. No 2 weeks' notice, nothing. Just up and left town for relatives out west. Okay, I'm gonna pause right there, because I often hate that cliche. That is like, oh, he's so insane that he whispered some insane thing and it drove them to instant madness and they quit. Like, I hate that shit so much. So the only way I can, cope with accepting that could be scary is, if the insane guy, whispered, I don't know, a family member that you know personally. Well, obviously, you know them personally. They're your family. Anyway, if he just, whispered your mom's name or something, or he whispered, your daughter, your son's name, I feel like that would be okay, I'm leaving. Fuck this. I'm getting them the fuck out of here. Maybe not. I don't know. That's just me trying to cope with this fucking cliche. He's so insane that he just said, and the guy was like, ooga booga, I'm fucking leaving this place, I quit. The whisper of unemployment. Anyway, a week had passed since the last incident. The nurse watching Thomas's room took a bathroom break. Nodding off, a noise outside the office roused my uncle and his new partner. They went to check on it, and they found Thomas face down. A trail of blood led them to his room. And this was the creepiest part, my uncle said, because in his room, they found he had meticulously drawn a maze, impossibly complicated, and in the center of the room, the center of the maze, were 2 things: a slip of paper and a human tongue. This guy had bitten off his own tongue. He had drawn a maze with his own blood, and somehow gotten out of his room to wander down the hall and die. My uncle picked up the paper and immediately understood why Greg had left. What Thomas had whispered to him must have been terrifying, because what was written on the paper was most disturbing. Oh, here we go. You were fun. Now I'll find Greg. End. Whatever. This was written 2013. This is how every fucking creepypasta was written back then. Weren't you guys ooga booga spooked? I sure was. It was really ooga booga spooky for me too. Pretty spooked. It was pretty spooky times.